Good evening, everybody. My name is Sean Hanna from the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. Welcome to Policing in a Pandemic, a series of webinars that we're going to be doing. And it did it again. Bye. To talk about, provide some supportive resources to all of you in law enforcement to help support you during this time. A little bit of housekeeping while we're here. I'm joined by BJ Wagner, also from the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute and the Interim Executive Director of the Caruth Police Institute, as well as Paul Stokes, who is on our Smart Justice team at the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute and retired DPD police officer and Marine Corps veteran. Right, Paul? Hoorah. And then I'll get to our guests that you can also see in just a minute, but a little bit of housekeeping to begin with. We have the features set up, both the chat functioning as well as the Q&A, where only us, the ones that you can see on the screen, we're the only ones that can see what's typed in there. If you're familiar with Zoom bombing and people showing up to meetings uninvited and then sharing things that are not appropriate for everybody else, we've decided to screen that out because we wanted to have the lowest barrier of entry for all of y'all that we want to have here to be here. So we will just ignore anything that we see that's inappropriate. So please, anytime throughout tonight's webinar, feel free to type in if you want to say something to us in the chat. And if you have any questions about the topics that Tempest and Kimberly are going to be talking about, or anything else when it comes to policing the pandemic, please put those in the Q&A, because that really helps us. That function keeps the questions organized so that we can make sure we can hit all of them. They can sometimes get lost on the chat. So it's best if you put that into the Q&A. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Kimberly Parker and Tempest Cheryl from 22 Kill. Kimberly Parker retired after serving 25 years in law enforcement. She served in the Patrol Division, Narcotics Unit, Criminal Investigation Division, Family Crimes Unit, Community Services Division, and Mental Health Law Liaison. Kimberly returned to patrol as a senior corporal and finished out her career. Kimberly served as a negotiator for 22 years and developed a peer support team. Kimberly is married to a combat veteran who served with the Army and Air Force, and her husband is currently serving in law enforcement as a detective. Kimberly received her master's in social work in 2013 and is now with 22 Kill as a licensed therapist. Tempest Cheryl is the Chief Operating Officer of 22 Kill, providing leadership, management, and vision over 22 Kill's programs and operations. Prior to serving in this role, Tempest founded Stay the Course Veteran Services. Stay the Course provides evidence-based therapies to veterans, first responders, and families at little to no cost, and is a program division of 22 Kill, the organization. She is a licensed professional counselor and is the spouse of Marine Corps and Army Reserve veteran who served in Afghanistan during 2008 to 2009, performing tactical psychological operations, and served 22 years as a police officer. So today's topic, and why we're so excited to have Tempest and Kimberly here with us, is Keep Calm and Crisis On, the nature of first responder stress and ways to effectively manage the stress of policing during this COVID-19 pandemic. So Tempest, Kimberly, welcome. Thank you for being here, and take it away.
All right, great. Thank you, Sean, for having us and allowing us to share information about stress, especially during this critical time. I'd like to talk about the nature of stress, how it's a normal condition. And then I want to talk about the cognitive piece of it, what actually goes through the brain when we feel stressed, and then the importance of managing that through self-regulation. So right now, because of COVID and the pandemic, law enforcement is probably experiencing an extra layer of stress. And not all stress is bad. We require stress to perform daily tasks. When stress becomes a problem is when it's cumulative, constant, or has no timeline, sort of like the COVID pandemic. And that's when it can be harmful to our health. In our police profession, we know Stress as a reality, it's our friend or foe. When it's our friend, it allows us to perform and protect ourselves when necessary. And when it's our foe, it's when we may get overly upset because someone sat in our favorite chair in briefing or took our radio battery from the shift before. However, if we're overloaded with stress, we don't know how to manage it, it can have a huge deterioration of our health and on our relationships. The current climate requires law enforcement to adapt to the new policies and call response. Although these changes are temporary, they will add additional stress to the job. When this stress piles up, it may rise to a level of destruction, and officers may be feeling a deterioration in their mental and physical health, a strain on their personal relationships at home or at work, being worried about bringing this virus home to their family. They may feel extra fatigued, experience an increase in anxiety, depression, or boredom, and they may have some altering personality. They're not as upbeat and happy as they used to be. And this information about stress is important, but what do we do about it? How are we mitigating it? I can give you all kinds of information about stress, how it's good, how it's bad, but what's going to be real important is to understand, how do I manage it? How do I control it so that it's not a detriment to my health and then bleed out on my family?
And that's one thing that is important, is to know that you have some control. You can have and obtain control over your stress so that it can become your friend, and you can use it in the positive, you can use it for your benefit.
Absolutely. So I'd like to just start, and Sean's going to show a picture of the brain and kind of show what happens in the brain when we feel extra stressed.
Give me 1 second. My brain disappeared. But you can go ahead and talk about the brain while I pull it up.
Okay. It's going to be a very simple picture. I don't want to overload people with the functioning of the brain, but right in the center of the brain is the amygdala. And the amygdala only has one job, and that's it senses dangers. It prepares our body for fight, flight, or freeze. And that's when it's our friend. We need to protect ourselves. We need to protect someone else or our family. Then, of course, we want the amygdala working to prepare us to protect ourselves. However, sometimes the amygdala will go off and we don't intend it to, maybe with a perceived threat, something that truly isn't a threat, or someone says something snarky to you, or someone doesn't use their turn signal driving down the road. This can automatically fire your amygdala. And the problem with that is when the amygdala is firing, it hijacks the frontal lobe, this part of the brain. And the number one job of the frontal lobe is impulse control, how we respond to things. And then executive functioning, language, and communication. And when the amygdala is firing and hijacks the frontal lobe, those two cannot work at the same time. Studies have shown that they can send messages back and forth, but they cannot function at the same time. So what's going to be important is to learn how to shut the amygdala down when you don't need it. And there's some evidence-based ways that we teach our clients to use to help that happen. So just the main thing is amygdala fires off. If we need it for threat, then that's very appropriate. When the amygdala is firing off and you don't need it because you're upset or you're tired or you're having an argument with your significant other, then just understand that your frontal lobe is not fully functioning. So you're not completely in control of your impulse control, and you don't have a way to really get out the language that you want to. But there is a way to bring the frontal lobe back on board and shut down the amygdala, since those two cannot function at the same time.
And how would you recognize that, Kim?
Well, generally there'll be a complete shift in your body. Your breathing will become shallow. Your body temperature may go up. It may be harder to find your words, or you may grit your teeth. It will look more like anger when you might not intend it to.
And so people closest to you will recognize that probably before you will. So that's when your family may think that you're mad at them or they've done something wrong. It's misinterpreted a lot, and I'm sure a lot of officers out there who are listening right now or watching, you may experience this with your loved ones, where they're misinterpreting your cues that are coming across when you may think that you're perfectly normal, but that stress is coming out sideways.
Correct. And this just isn't the cop brain, this is everyone's brain.
Yes.
So not picking on law enforcement, but
Right.
people outside of law enforcement go through this same experience.
Yes, it's a human thing.
Correct. So normally when we come in, when our clients come in for services, that's the first thing that we're teaching is self-regulation. How can I understand what's happening to my body, and then what are things that I can do to control that?
And so during this COVID crisis, there's so much uncertainty in the community. We don't know who's contagious, or who's going to expose us, but you guys still have to be out doing your jobs every day, every night, around the clock. And so that uncertainty causes a spike in that stress level. And so you've got the normal stress level of your job, and then you have this other layer. And so this is really important to think about the tools that you can use to manage that, because if you don't, it can cause burnout. And our goal is to help you keep doing your jobs, keep doing what you do in the most effective and healthiest way that we can.
So Tempa and Kimberly, y'all are headquartered up in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. You have an office in Dallas where y'all see clients and run programs, as well as over in Fort Worth. And, you've been serving veterans and their families for years, and as well as now law enforcement over the last few years, law enforcement and first responders as well. So over the last couple of months, since we've been in this COVID environment, obviously maintaining confidentiality, not getting very specific on things, but the officers and family members of officers that y'all are seeing, what are you hearing about? What makes, y'all talking about this topic tonight, the stress, the detrimental health risk associated with that, all of the things that you're talking about. Make that real for me. Like the officers and family members that you're seeing, how is this affecting people right now?
Well, I think it's just the uncertainty of it, because they're not understanding when it's going to end. And of course, one thing about officers is they do like consistency. So it's okay to check in service when there's not a pandemic, because you can kind of figure out what's going to happen. But if you're rolling in every day and there's a different change, or you may not have the appropriate PPE equipment, then that's going to be added stress on top of just the daily stress you have in the field.
And there's additional stress from the feedback that I've been getting, additional stress at home. It's a catch-22. It's you want to be home, but you're afraid to be home. And so there's no safe place, because if I'm home, if I was exposed, I can expose my family. So there's just really no safe place to be. And that's the feedback that I'm getting.
And then a lot of shift in what officers are doing. So you have school resource officers that are generally in school now that are not, probably back in patrol. I know for my husband, he is a detective, but I know he's been asked to go back to patrol to cover some shifts. So that whole dynamic can be extremely upsetting to family time and just not knowing where they're going to be next.
So the routine is off, your normal daily routine. You have feeling like you're less in control than you've ever been. Feel that feeling of out of control. And obviously this line of work can cause that on a normal basis sometimes because, you know, there's a lot of surprises. But that's why you want that structure and routine to keep you grounded in your work.
Right.
So what do you, you know, I'll ask you guys this, and I may ask, you know, BJ to also give some feedback as well. Talking about the stress, right? The additional stress on the job, and talking about how, Kimberly, you were talking about how your husband being a detective, he's also working some patrol now. So, you know, from my military experience, it's kind of like everybody can clean a toilet. Like when it's all hands on deck and the job just has to get done, that's what has to get done, right? But it doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean it's fun, and it doesn't mean it doesn't cause additional stress, obviously. What do y'all feel like organizational leaders within the departments could do to kind of help with some of the stress management? Do you hear anything from the officers that are coming in to see you about, you know, wishes that they would have, right? You know, complaints maybe about the department, or just what's stressing them about it. It might be part of the job, right? It doesn't mean it's not normal for policing, but that they're, you know, anything that they could wish. Or Kimberly, from your direct experience of being in law enforcement and in peer support in law enforcement back when you know, were still in uniform, what are the things that you wish your leaders either, you know, understood more directly or heard about from the field, and or could make changes about? And if you don't have anything, that's okay. It was one of the questions that got posed to us.
Hey, Sean, I'm actually happy to cover that question. If you don't mind, let me just
no, please go right ahead.
Let me jump in. You know, when the pandemic is unfolding, it's unfolding very quickly for everybody. And one thing that police leadership had to do is had to adapt very quickly as an organization as a whole to make sure that they're covering the necessary policies to keep their departments running and addressing public safety, which is part of this pandemic, while making sure that they're keeping up with the federal guidelines and the state guidelines and governor's orders. And that's a lot for police leadership to take on. So it's also very important, though, that while they're under this tremendous amount of stress and this constant changing environment, to realize that the troops are going through the same thing, which can be a pretty big ask. So organizationally, I think it's very important for police leaders to ensure that the message of support filters down to all of the troops. And I know that seems cliche a bit, but operationally what that means is make sure it's getting into briefings, that if there's another policy change and it's having to go through, make sure that that policy change is followed up with, let us know how you're doing. So letting the troops know that there is a resource in the department, whether it's a peer, whether it's a chaplain, whether it's a deputy chief, whether it's a sergeant, it doesn't matter. As long as the troops know there is a resource in the department ready to listen if they're feeling overwhelmed and can point them in the right direction. But to do that, police leadership need to be really plugged in. How do you take the temperature of your department? And that's looking at departmental trends. Is everybody showing up every day? Is somebody suddenly calling in sick every day? Is somebody suddenly not getting along with their peers, or they have shut down a bit? So making sure that, you know, you're plugged in so that if somebody is changing, you can grab that change quickly and plug that person into resources. But by and large, it's just understanding that these policy changes that are happening rapidly, and rightfully so, feel heavy to the troops, and making sure that there is somebody there ready to say, this is heavy and we've got you. You know, come and plug in here, and that message is filtering down and not just happening in ComStat or happening in command level meetings, that you're pushing that information down.
And if I could just tag on to that, from the boots on the ground folks that we see, you know, in our services, including our peer support that we provide, I think that you've said it perfectly, BJ. They want to feel supported, and there's already this divide that they feel, you know, between command and boots on the ground. And the extra effort from command to make it okay for this to be heavy and make it okay for this to impact you in some way, and that it's a normal response to an abnormal situation. If everyone could just be okay with that and then respond with support, then I really think it would go a long way.
Great.
I could say one more thing. I want to encourage everybody who is listening in to look at your chat function. I'm reposting some comments from some of the attendees. Originally, we had intended this to be more interactive amongst our attendees, but if you post a comment, I'll ask your permission before I share it with everybody else. But I think what we're talking about rings really true to the comment that we just got, is that a lot of officers are feeling like things are changing rapidly and they're not getting information and they're not getting answers, and they're frustrated with administration. And that is an example of where administration has been moving very quickly at their level to keep the ship afloat, but hasn't been checking on everybody down below. And it's that checking on folks down below and plugging in tightly to those troops to make sure that they are getting the information they need, as well as the resources that they need. That's more important now than ever.
Well, and I think even to go along with that, is sometimes there just aren't any answers. Like, you know what I mean? We're in unprecedented times right now, and you know, for the men and women that are having to be out there on the street, keeping us all safe, you know, some of those protective factors, the PPE, the how to interact with the public, I mean, all of those things that they're facing right now that we don't have answers for, you know, and our healthcare workers and all of that. I mean, we're all keeping track of the news and all that's going on with that. So, wow, so that's a lot. So, yeah, I'm starting to feel stressed just from this. So what do we do about that? Tempa, Kimberly, what are some of the things that we can do? You know, first, obviously, we would have to acknowledge how we're feeling, acknowledge the stress that we're having, not just feel it, but acknowledge that it is, and recognize that there are things that we can do. What do you suggest?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, acknowledge it and then be willing to do something about it. There's a few things that we share to help officers with self-regulation that are real easy, but they're not simple because the application piece, because right now they do things a certain way. So when you start introducing new skills and new habits, that's hard for them, or anyone really. One of the things that we use that's simple is tactical breathing, is just breathing and calming the body down. And Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, he's an Army guy, he developed an app that's free that you can put on your phone that it explains why breathing is important. It will teach you a breathing count method, and then it'll actually do the counting for you. And you don't have to do tactical breathing. You can do box breathing or whatever works for you. We have to call it tactical breathing. You can't sell belly breathing to dudes, so we try to make it as macho as possible, but what it boils down to is it's just belly breathing and calming the body down. And then Valor has an app that you can log on to, and it shares all kinds of things to help you with, like pre-service checklist before checking in service, officer safety and wellness tips, access to officer safety and wellness videos. They have podcasts, publications, and events. That's an excellent tool. Another skill that we teach officers, along with the breathing and information where they can go find other helpful skills, is eye movements, just basic eye movements. And the easiest way I explain this to my first responders is, if you're out on the shooting range, after you finish shooting, what are you told to do? You are told to look around and open your field of vision, open your peripheral. That helps you break away from zoning into one particular target. You got to see what else is around you. That is helpful to the brain. So you don't move your head like this, you just take your eyes and from one corner of a room to the next, you just move them back and forth. And again, eye movements, breathing, they're portable. They go where you do. You don't have to roll out a yoga mat in Walmart to get this done. But the important part is find which one that works for you and practice it when you're not all elevated, and be deliberate about using it when you are. And then also understand this is a new habit that you're creating, and you got to give yourself some grace during this transaction. Another technique we teach, and I like this one because you can share it with little humans because it's like playing a game, and it's just grounding. So remember, when the amygdala fires off, we lose our impulse control and our functioning, so we want to get that back on. So you simply look around where you are and think, what's 5 things I can see, 4 things I can touch, 3 things I can hear, 2 things I can smell, and 1 thing I can taste. Even if you can't smell it or taste it, you know what roses smell like, you know what spearmint gum tastes like, and that has shut down the amygdala and put the frontal lobe back on board. So you're not so impulsive, and you're able to find words that will probably work better for you. And then usually what we're seeing, especially during COVID, is because when your stress is elevated, the first thing to go is sleep. And the information we share with officers reference sleep is the body cannot be stressed and relaxed at the same time. So at night, we usually share a guided meditation. These are easily on YouTube, where you just listen to relaxation, progressive muscle relaxation, just anything to calm the body down and turn the mind off, so that sleep can come back to somewhat normal level.
So just a note about some of these tools. Like she said, you're carrying these around. You can just visualize these are on your belt, and they're with you everywhere you go. We have these built-in tools in our nervous system to calm the body. Otherwise, if we didn't, you wouldn't be able to do the work that you do. So you're already doing it. It's just when things start feeling out of control, stopping and realizing, okay, I can intentionally do this to get back on track. So you do it already subconsciously. So if becoming more intentional with it. Also, communicating, like you may come home from some craziness, especially now with this COVID situation. And again, I'm the spouse of a retired police officer, so I understand the other side of it. Sometimes I just need my husband to tell me, hey, I need some time. I need some time to cool down. So just that much little information, I back off, give him his space. He has a moment to kick in that automatic response in the body and use his tools to get back online. And so we can actually have some positive interactions. So I just want to throw that perspective out there. I saw some comments. BJ, did you have some comments to share?
Yeah, if you guys will look in your chat function as you're sending comments, I'm asking your permission, of course, and then reposting them. But I really like one, and if it's okay for me to share your name, you can share my name while I'm reading your comment. But I posted one about a lot is about control. We freak out when we feel out of control or in danger. And one of the best resources and Jim Reynolds, thank you. Jim said, this is from Jim Reynolds. He said one of the best resources that he had seen for this is an emotional survival for law enforcement. And Jim is a retired military police officer and currently an LPC. And, as a former officer and married to a retired officer also, who is also a former Marine, I get the control thing. And right now, none of this is in our control. We don't know when it's going to end. We don't know when the quarantine is going to end, and you guys can get back to work at your extra jobs and supplementing your income. And your kids can get back to their normal routines, and husband and wives can get back out of the house and to work, and we can all just get back to the business of being back to business. And we don't know that. We don't have any control over that right now. And one of the things I think that makes control so important to a police officer is we're taught to control the environment for our safety and the public safety. So it's ingrained to constantly need to be in control of that environment. And when it gets out of control is a sign of danger. Like that's a danger indicator to us. So that weird feeling you have in your gut is a feeling that you've been trained to have, but it's constant now. And so the regulation things that you guys are going to go over about how to picture a minimal stress and practice that minimal stress until it no longer feels bad is an excellent thing for that needing to feel in control. And then Eric posted a comment. Eric, let me know if I can share your last name. That he was not in law enforcement during the HIV crisis, but he tries to tell officers that this situation must be similar. Everyone fearful of those with HIVs. And now officers have virtually no fear when dealing with an HIV positive citizen. They just take precautions. And I think that's also very true. I remember when bird flu, everybody remember bird flu was out. And I was a deputy director with the Department of Criminal Justice at that time, and we weren't taking these kind of pandemic precautions to prevent the transmission of bird flu. And I actually caught that and was tremendously sick. But, the rest of the world was like, well, just wash your hands and get a flu shot. And, although that's not where we are now, I agree with Eric. I think that at some point we'll get there. He also shared that he's surprised more officers are not upset with not having every piece of high-tech PPE for viruses, but we don't really seem as concerned with not having the necessary protective gear regarding your bulletproof vest, helmet, shields, and et cetera. And I think that's very representative of what I mentioned in a previous broadcast about the 24-hour news cycle inundating everybody with what they should be worried about. And so we've gotten out of our own common sense in some places, which, as Tempa and Kimberly can probably tell us, enhances that stress feeling of being out of control because nothing is in our common sense longer.
It's an internal cognitive feeling of being out of control and an external as well. So the world around me is out of control and all the thoughts in my head are out of control. And if you have both of those happening at the same time, that's not a good recipe.
And one more comment that I'll share before turning back over to you guys to go over some more of the self-regulation stuff is from our friends at that peer support couple, Kathy and Javier Bustos, who have two things. One is, please remember that if this particular pandemic period is bringing up old traumatic experiences, that's a completely normal response to any critical incident that you've been through. Is that dynamic stress can create a new feeling of old stress and can make those previous traumatic incidents seem current again. And this is the best time ever to reach out to a peer, just one phone call, one text message. Doesn't have to be a certified peer, doesn't have to be anybody with specialized training, just somebody that you trust that you can reach out to and say, this shit is not working for me anymore. And you can ask for help and get the help when you need it.
Right.
And we have a lot, when you're in session, especially with control, because we really talk about what is control, and we really narrow down exactly what that looks like, because I think officers really fight to have control and they don't want to surrender to anything different, like maybe the breathing, because they may not have control. And I'm like, you don't have control. All you have is anxiety. Like, I need you to see the difference. The control is within you, and keeping yourself calm so that you respond appropriately when needed. And you can use tactical breathing on the way to a hot call, because just because you're breathing and calming your body down doesn't mean you're not going to be able to respond. You're breathing and calming your body down so you can hit the sweet spot when you arrive on scene and perform at your best. And it's just getting used to practicing those skills.
Kimberly, for those of us that may not know, can you tell us a little bit more about what tactical breathing looks like actually when you're doing it?
So it's a 4-count method, and you breathe in through your nose, and it's not just taking some air in, it's actually filling up the lungs with air. And I don't let the people I see in session cheat with this. I generally have them put their hands behind their head just like this and take a deep breath in, because the only way they're going to be able to do it correctly is to do it right. They can't cheat having this position here, but once they understand what that feels like, so you're breathing in for 4, and then you're holding it for 4, and then slowly letting it out, holding for 4, and it's generally a cycle of 4 times. Sometimes you may need more. Some people don't like breathing. They say the eye movements actually work better. Whatever it is, find it and use it. Sometimes I know for myself, I have to use all of them just to get where I need to be. But they are evidence-based, and they've been shown to be effective. It's just trust in the process and wanting to do better.
That's a huge part of it. We have to want to, and we have to choose. So that's your ultimate control piece, and being able to manage yourself and your situation is choosing to do it. There's a choice in that.
What do y'all see when you're working with your clients, you know, particularly a law enforcement client, when you talk it needs to be a choice? What are the things that get in the way of making that choice? What do you experience? What are the things that the individual that you work on in session, that they work on their own, to take that from being something that's in the mind of, well, yeah, I'm sure it could help, and you know, but, right? So what are those things? What that officers are experiencing that, and then what do you notice helps shift that to making that choice?
Usually they'll say, but that person just really knows how to push my buttons, especially significant others. They installed those buttons. Of course they do. But who's squeezing your muscles? You are still in control of your response and calming your body down. And just the application piece is so hard. And I always tell them, it's not going to be perfect. If you want to fall on the floor and have a wall-eyed fit, then do it. But I want you to know what the outcome looks like when you do that versus when you calm down and maybe respond a little differently. And I'll say, these all sound silly. And most of my clients come back the second week or at the next session and will say, I really thought you were full of shit, but I did it and it worked. And I always say, just give me a week. Just give me a week. Not even every day. Maybe give me every other day, but at least try it and see if it works for you and see how it can make such a big difference.
So let's go over some of the recalling of experience. You want to go through that with them?
Yeah. And what happens is officers say, well, I think I'm calm. I don't know what that feels like. Or maybe I hadn't been calmed in so many years. I just don't remember that feeling. So usually we'll start talking about what maybe brought them in, maybe something going on at work or at their house. And I'll say, okay, as we're talking about this, what's happening to your body right now? And they'll be like, oh, my heart rate's up, and they're explaining all that. And I go, I'm going to keep talking about this thing that's bothering you, but I want you to calm your body down. I want you to relax your jaw. And a good way to know that you're not clenching your jaw is to place the tongue at the bottom of your mouth. You just can't do both. So I'll say, relax your tongue, relax your shoulders, relax your chest, and just kind of melt into the seat where we're sitting. Okay, how do you feel now? Well, I'm still relaxed. Well, we're still talking about that thing that drove you up. See the difference? This doesn't, the incident didn't change, but you did. And how are you ready to respond now? And so and I'll say, just practice that. Just think, you know, things that aggravate the snot out of you. Sit there, bring it up, calm the body down with that still on the mind, and just notice the difference, seeing if you can make that shift.
And you can do the same thing with the eye movements. So you can practice the disturbance, the thing that's disturbing you, practice talking about it, thinking about it, and using the eye movements back and forth, corner to corner of the room, and just feel the body change when you do that. So noticing how your body responds is really important, because when you notice that, then you can start doing whatever that helped you. You can keep doing it. So noticing it is part of the power of it. That makes sense.
So Tempest, talking about the eye movements, where can people find more resources for learning about, and I would say, and let's just throw that out there, for an individual that wants to learn, you know, a technique, the eye movement technique, and that they can use it on their own. And then also for, you know, clinicians or anyone else, that it could be something that in working with their clients to get trained on that or have that as a resource.
Well, the clinician piece, we just kind of draw the eye movements from EMDR, which is an evidence-based therapy that we do here. So it's just pulling that, moving your eyes back and forth. And it's easier to explain it to a police officer because they understand what they need to do, and then you just kind of draw it in with them moving their eyes back and forth. And so if you had a non-police officer in front of you, you could take your pen and I need you to follow my pen with your eyes and your eyes only. And then about the third pass, you'll say, what's happening? And they take a deep breath. Your body can't help it. And if you try not to do it, you're going to fall out because you're holding your breath too long. And just notice that. And they'll be like, oh, okay. And when you can apply that when you feel anxious or can't fall asleep, or you're in the doctor's office having a procedure, you can just lay there, eye movements back and forth, and calm you down.
It's bilateral stimulation. And so really, if someone wanted to research this, researching bilateral stimulation and what it does to the brain would be a good place to start. And doing research on eye movement desensitization reprocessing, the EMDR approach, you can research that. You can find therapists who do that method. It's not talk therapy, and so it's really effective. It's a gold standard therapy for trauma or stress-related experiences.
An interesting comment from Courtney Runnels, who is a mental health coordinator at a police department. And she said that she's hearing from her officers that they feel guilty now that they're home more often because they realize how much they have missed out on not being at home, and guilt because they see how much work their spouse is doing to keep the house going. And I can imagine if an officer has been working his regular shift and then picking up 2 or 3 extra jobs during the week, especially on the weekend, to make ends meet, and now suddenly they are home more often, that they do see how much time they're missing, and that guilt, or even the anxiety from that guilt, and then the extra anxiety now that they're leaving to go back to work, and the kiddos may be more attached and clingy as the officer is leaving the house now than they have been before, can just add on to the stress that they're feeling every day at work now. What are some things that they can do to practice these the techniques that you guys are telling me about that you do in your office? How can an officer take that home and use it today?
Downloading the app, the Tactical Breather app. It walks you all the way through it, and just practicing that. The eye movements, just literally looking straight ahead and moving your eyes back and forth, and just paying attention to how your body breathes and calms down. The grounding, you probably just have to memorize the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 things, or you could probably Google it and it'll pull it up for you.
Grounding techniques, if you Google grounding techniques, you'll get all kinds of information about that. It helps you focus on something non-stressful that's outside of your body, and it calms you down. It centers you.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about grounding techniques, what it looks like? Like if an officer wanted to do a grounding technique at home, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, what are those things that they need to look like? What do those things stand for? What does that really look like?
It's 5 things you can see. So you're basically intentionally focusing on those 5 things. The 5 things you can see, and so you say it to yourself. If you're around people and you don't want them to know, you can say it in your head. Or if you're in your car, you can say it out loud. And so focus on 5 things you can see. So I see my steering wheel. I see the cars driving by. I see the birds flying by. I see the rain falling. So you're just intentionally focusing on those 5 items. 4 things you can touch. And I encourage you to actually touch what's around you, what's outside of your body. So I may touch this chair, the fabric on the chair, the table next to me. You can actually touch your skin or touch a loved one sitting next to you. So what are the 4 things around me that I can actually touch? 3 things you can hear. So what am I hearing right now? I'm going to focus on the wind blowing or the water running in the stream outside, or the birds chirping, or focusing on 3 things you can hear. 2 things you can smell, the roses or the dinner that my spouse is cooking, or the laughter of my children. And then 1 thing you can taste, something that you enjoy. What is your favorite thing, favorite food, or something that really gives you joy? So you're intentionally bringing your focus to those items that are connected to your senses, and that calms the body. And it helps take your brain out of fight or flight mode. It helps bring the front of your brain, the frontal lobe, back online where you can be rational and logical and think things through.
And it's something quick and easy that folks can do.
It's very easy. And grounding can be, you don't even have to do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can sit here and just run your fingers along the edge of this chair and just focus on how that fabric feels, what it looks like, and just completely focus your mind on that one thing. And you're focusing on the senses, how it feels, how it sounds, what it looks like. Those are the main key components of that.
I want to ask y'all to tell us about one more thing. Can you tell us about visual imagery and how to operate, how somebody can do that at home?
Well, you want to try to think of a place that you go that is very calming and peaceful. It could be the lake or in a deer stand or the mountains, and no one else is with you there. It's just you and these mountains and this scenery, and it's kind of just like, what does that look like? What do I remember from being there? The smells, the sounds, the peacefulness of it, and then just kind of sitting and resonating in that.
And what does my body feel like when I'm there? So you visualize yourself being there. We call it calm, safe place. So it's my calm place. So I have this specific place, this picture in my mind that I visualize being in. And mine is by a lake with some trees around it. And so you get as specific as you can. The temperature of the air, how that feels on your skin. What am I feeling in my body? Do I feel relaxed, peaceful? What does it smell like? Do I smell the water, the air? And so you just really immerse yourself in that visual, that image in your mind, and all of the senses that go with that. And your whole body will completely change. Your heart rate will go down, your stress level will go down, and you will become more rational and calm. It's pretty simple.
I'd like to go back to Courtney's question real quick about the officers and their guilt at being home. As crappy as this COVID pandemic is, I still think we will move forward with some very positive things. So maybe not using that guilt to resonate in, but how can I still be at work and still help my spouse at home and still spend the quality time with my kids? What will that look like now that I see the importance of it?
Right. I agree with that 100%. That's something positive that we can take out of this situation. And even people all over who are working from home, you know, we're not used to being home that much. You know, we're used to being out and away from our families. And so it's a great reminder of maybe I need to do more of this. Maybe I need to start using some of that sick time instead of stacking it up. You know, take the day off, spend it with people that you enjoy being with, that you trust.
Yeah, that's a great point to, you know, to find the positives in the situation without getting all new agey and all that. You know, what may have not come out, and I just wanted to add before we get to the resources is, you know, I do a lot of work with combat veterans. I'm a combat veteran myself. You know, following my service, I studied traditional Chinese medicine, right? So acupuncture and all of that. And one of the things that I learned, it sounds all woo-woo and new agey, and it's not. Like, it's not. It's just a different medicine. But one of the things that really resonated with me is when we learned about ancient warriors, Asian warriors, like the samurai and such, that the balance that was part of their training, where it's all the martial arts, it's all the weapons, it's all the aggression, the violence, the comfort with violence, that's just part of the role, but it's also the art, the calligraphy, flower arranging, meditation, the practice that they did. That's the yin and yang, right? That's the balance between the things. And in our culture, we miss that a lot. The opportunity is there, but these hard jobs of military, law enforcement, first responder, that toughness, oftentimes working on those other things that are soft is denigrated, right? I don't need to do that. I just need to have another bottle of whiskey, right? Like it's that thought process where a lot of this comes from, and the techniques that y'all have been talking about it's finding that balance for those things. And then the SEALs found this when they started doing work, because they were seeing the high incidence of alcoholism, substance use, like all the things that they were seeing with this high op tempo over the last 20 years of war. And they could not get the hardcore warriors to do meditation or belly breathing, just like you were talking about. They had to call it sniper breathing, because that's what they're taught to do. When you're out there by yourself, maybe with a spotter, right? No defense, no anything, you're in like deep, and you've got to stay calm and take that shot. You have to have those physiological controls that then change, that influence the psychological to effectively do the mission. So they called it sniper breathing, and then everybody would do it. So I love that you have the tactical breathing. Speaking of which, so everybody that's with us, feel free, fire your questions into the Q&A. We're going to go through some resources, but in the meantime, like while we're doing this, fire into the Q&A, fire into the chat, and we'll hit those while we're going through some of the resources that Tempa and Kimberly wanted to share with us. So let's see, let me do a little screen share here.
While you're doing that, yeah, there you go. That's the Tactical Breather app, just so you'll know what it looks like. You can download that on Android or Apple. Yep.
And what does it do? So you got the app on your phone. What happens?
Once you click on it, it'll give you a couple of things at the bottom. One of it is just a refresher why we need to breathe. And then they'll teach you how to do the breathing. It'll go over that again. And then there's, it'll actually do the breathing or the counting for you. So you can hit the count and maybe set it in your lap or on the chair, and then just listen to the counting while your body's performing the breathing. And then there's an option to change the voice.
So the emotional survival for law enforcement, the book that you have here, tell us about that.
This is information I share with my first responders, a good book to have and to read. my husband has a lot of books he doesn't read, is this book, and it's pretty short. Chapter 5 covers a lot about the hypervigilance, and that's something that I think officers really need to understand. But again, it goes back to understanding hypervigilance, and the way to control it is back to just these basic breathing, grounding, and eye movements. And then I share with, I always share with the officer that he could provide a book for his significant other on I Love a Cop, or if I see a family member, it's a really good read, has a lot of good information about living in the house with a police officer.
Was it written by the spouse of a police officer or someone who's done a lot of work with?
Yeah, just a lot of work, yes. And there's a lot
I'm
of,
sorry, I jumped up.
Okay.
There's a lot of testimonies within the book.
So it's important to know that unless everybody in that system or family understands both sides of it, then you won't get as far as you could. So whatever we can do to help see the other perspective, and for myself as a spouse, just learning about hypervigilance, learning what was really like in his job. He spent many, many years without ever sharing anything because he didn't want to bring it home to me. But really at the end of the day, it was hurting us because I couldn't understand anything about his work. And if I understood that, I would understand him. So we got there over the years, but that's one thing that I like to pass on to the people that I work with is just a little bit of information can be really powerful, and we can seek to understand and really have healthier relationships.
And then finally, you've probably heard of these folks. What can you tell us? Tell us all about 22 Kill, what you guys do up in the DFW area, what you do virtually.
So we have 2 offices in Dallas and Fort Worth, where we host all kinds of different services. We do anything where from peer support to individual, couples, family therapies. We have a wide variety of approaches. We believe that there are many paths to healing, and talk therapy is not always what works for some people. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. We do non-traditional therapies. We provide outdoor activities. It's peer-to-peer, people coming together, building connection, building community, and finding a safe place to be yourself. We have our wind therapy program. Motorcycles is the main platform there. Forage is our hunting, fishing, hiking, all things outdoors. And we provide retreats. It's amazing what can happen around a campfire. And then we have our watch program, those are specific services that are delivered to families of the fallen, whether it be military or first responder, it doesn't matter. We make sure that they have the resources they need and the healing that they need to recover from the grief and loss. So that's overall what we provide. We do virtual peer, face-to-face peer, telehealth. So we can serve anyone in the state of Texas for telehealth. And our virtual peer support programs that we're rolling out in the next 2 weeks can serve anyone anywhere in the nation.
And we also I'm sorry, I was just going to include some more. We're all CISM trained, so we can assist with debriefings. We do a lot of peer support trainings for departments, and we do QPR, which is suicide prevention training. So we offer a lot of resources just outside of traditional and non-traditional therapy. So what I want first responders to understand is when you come to 22 Kill, it's off the radar. We're we're not collecting information to pass on to your department. We're not looking to diagnose you. Some people come in and already have a diagnosis. That's fine. We're going to treat your symptoms. That's what we're going to treat to help minimize or manage those symptoms. The first 6 sessions are free to our clients, not to us. We have grants and do a lot of fundraisers to help them with that. So those first 6 sessions cost you nothing, and then we go to a very reasonable sliding scale. We have all kinds of, we are open Monday through Saturday. We have evening appointments. So it's very fitting for the first responder schedule.
So what's the best way for, you know, someone, if they wanted to refer a friend or contact you themselves, or just ask you questions about any of these other resources that you were talking about? What's the best way to get a hold of y'all?
For me, it's my email, which is at Kimberly@22kill.com.
And then my email is Tempa, T-E-M-P-A, Tempa@22kill.com. If you wanted to ask general questions, you can email info@22kill.com, and that email will get directed to the person who can answer your question, whatever it is.
Great. Well, ladies, thank you so much for everything that you do, taking care of our veterans, taking care of our first responders. Again, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Also want to provide a reminder to everybody that if you have questions concerning policing during COVID, so not these resources, but the policing, feel free to contact BJ at BJ Wagner at texasstateofmind.org. She put it in the chat for you, so you have everybody's email. We're 1 minute over time, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everything that you're doing out there on the streets, policing, keeping us safe, the thin blue line. I appreciate it. Everybody here appreciates it. My family appreciates it. Thank you. Stay safe. We'll see you next week with Blue Help, right, BJ? All right. We'll see y'all next week, 6 o'clock. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Bye.
Thank you.